tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Oh, well, it's very, very upsetting on a Saturday afternoon when you're out for a walk by Sydney Harbour and you look down to your phone and you see a message from Cricket Australia saying Josh Hazlewood underwent repeat imaging today that has confirmed a hamstring strain injury. Initial scans Wednesday were clear of a muscle strain. However, follow-up imaging today has confirmed the injury. Early imaging can occasionally underestimate low-grade muscle injuries. As a result, Josh Hazlewood will not travel to Perth and has been ruled out of the first Ashes Test match. Michael Neser has been added to the Australian squad for the first Test match to cover the injuries to Abbott and Josh Hazlewood. This is a nightmare scenario for Australia, as Paul Newman in the chat says, to have Hazlewood and Cummins ruled out of the first Test. And it's a nightmare for Australia and a dream for England. And to rub salt into the wound, earlier today, it was confirmed Mark Wood has been cleared of a hamstring strain and will continue to prepare for the first Test. Now, we saw Hazlewood say that a couple of days ago, so maybe there's just a glimmer of hope in a couple of days Wood gets ruled out. But this, you have to say, is a huge advantage to England. There can be absolutely no doubt about it. Gav Joshi, co-host of the podcast, has sent me a message earlier today, and he said this on the show. I just don't understand why Hazlewood played the Shield game. Now, I disagree with Gav. I think if Hazlewood and Stark need and want a first-class game to prepare for the first Test, you have to do it. And if you get injured, bad luck. I guess the counter to Gav's point, and he's not here, so I don't want to argue against him when he's not here, but you could say at least him playing in this Shield match has maybe prevented this happening in the first Test. Maybe he would have got to Perth and he goes down in the first innings and Australia are bowlers short for the first Test. So you have to take some positives out of the negatives. You have to try and look at glass half full. That's not my normal approach, but I guess that's one way to look at it. This hasn't happened once the Test has started, so we're not going to be a bowler short at this stage. But yeah, so he's out, and you just can't underestimate what this must do to the psychology of the England team. If you'd said to them 6 months ago, first Test at Perth, that we know Pat Cummins, and I'll just read out Cummins' record, 71 tests, 309 Test wickets at an average of 22.1 at a strike rate of 45.9. And Josh Hazlewood, you've got over 600 Test wickets sitting on the sideline. Josh Hazlewood, 76 tests, 295 wickets at an average of 24.21, strike rate 52.2. I mean, that is a huge, huge blow to Australia. Not to just have Cummins out, but to have Hazlewood as well. And, it was forecast when Cummins was ruled out that, my oh my, we really need Hazlewood. Well, this really opens the door for England to come at Australia hard and try and go one up in the series. And I want to talk about that a bit in a minute, but just on the replacement. So, we're going to have Stark and Boland. Hopefully neither of those get injured. And then you would imagine Brendan Doggett will make his Test debut at Perth Optus Stadium. Doggett has a great first-class record, 190 wickets at an average of 26.46, strike rate of 49. But he's really improved in the last few years, taking 11 wickets in the Shield final. And then this this season, since coming back from injury, he took 2 for 67 in his one-day return, and then in his first-class return, 6 for 48 in the first match and 5 for 66 in the second. So he's taken 2 5-wicket hauls since coming back into the first-class arena. And I had a chat with him after that list day game out at Cricket Central, and he is desperate to play a first test because he's been one of those bowlers that's been on the fringe for a while, a bit like Sean Abbott, and never really had the opportunity. And now with Hazlewood and Cummins out, he's got the opportunity to step up. And he's got the opportunity to be a friggin' hero. I mean, they all do now. Stark, Boland, and Doggett have the opportunity to be legends of Australian cricket. I don't know if the listeners or viewers were around to remember the 1995 tour of the West Indies. Australia went there desperate to dethrone the West Indies and become the undisputed best test side in the world. And on the eve of the series, we lost all our bowlers, McDermott, Fleming, all the big bowlers, and at the time, and a young Glenn McGrath came in, Paul Rifle and Brendan Julian to cover for those big fish, and they bowled out of their skins and bowled Australia to victory. So, this is the opportunity that Doggett, Boland, and Stark have in front of them. But it is definitely a big boost for England. And I guess, what does this do for England and Australia's chances in the first test match? So I guess from an England point of view, huge opportunity, no Hazlewood, no Cummins. And whatever you say about Boland and Doggett, they're not as good as those two. And they are unproven, really, in a 5-test series. Boland's never played 5 tests before. Last time in 2023, he was spanked. Now, different conditions. We know the 6 for 7, but he's no Cummins. He's no Hazlewood. You just can't compare Boland to those two. Very good player he is, but I just wonder, England, if England are going to line him up again, much like they did in 2023. And then you've got Brendan Doggett. Now, I read out his figures. He's in red-hot form, and they often say, you want to pick players when they're in form. So his confidence will be up. He bowls fast, up around that 140, 145. He's a skiddy bowler. He's a different trajectory to Hazlewood and Cummins. Skids onto the bat more, tries to just shape the ball away from the right-handers with some outswing, and then every now and then angle one back in at the right-handers. But again, no Hazlewood, no Cummins. He's going to be making his debut in Australia's biggest test match, maybe for the last 5 years. I can't think of a bigger test match for Australia than this one coming up at Optus Stadium. So this will be a big confidence booster for England. They'll look across at the Australian team and they won't see Hazlewood and Cummins. But I guess the pressure is on England now to take advantage of this. And this is maybe catch-22 for England because, they were coming in as underdogs. Terrible record in Australia. Abysmal record. Haven't won a test match here for 15 years. But now the door is ajar. There's some pressure on them to take that opportunity. Hazlewood's low-grade hamstring strain, you would imagine he'll be back for the second test. Cummins tracking well. Perhaps Australia has Hazlewood and Cummins for the rest of the series. Now, Cummins probably wouldn't be able to play all 4 test matches, but, this first test may be England's best opportunity to strike a blow at the Aussies, and that will bring pressure to them. And it also, maybe Australia can use this as an advantage. They're going in as underdogs now, with no Hazlewood and no Cummins. Pressure's on England to deliver. So it's a huge blow to Australia's squad, though. I mean, Smith, he was speaking after the Shield match, and he was so relieved that Hazlewood wasn't injured, and you could tell how worried he was about the situation. There was a scenario, I think Smith was telling, Boland and the opposition maybe to bowl only one spell because Smith didn't want to lose Boland as well. But this will test Smith's captaincy, and I just wonder, and it's an interesting call from Paul Newman here, which I was going to bring up, but what does this do for the top order? Do Australia want to play Green and Webster and have that extra bowling backup? I think you do. it's not ideal. Australia's probably got themselves in a situation where none of it's ideal because you're going to either have Weatherald unproven debuting or you're going to leave him out and make Marnus open. So there's no ideal situation for Australia right now. But would Australia want to go in with Webster and Green? I mean, we saw Green, he bowled, I think, maybe 15, 16 overs across the 2 innings in Perth. But that's not a lot. Like, what if Australia does come up against it at Optus Stadium and England do what India did and make 400-500 in an innings? Do you want, Green and Webster in that situation? Because can Green bowl you 20 overs in an innings? So what if they push Green and then he does an injury and he's out for the summer? So, yeah, it does certainly change things. And it also depends on the pitch. Now, how green will the pitch be? Because if Australia turn up and it's a green mamba and they think this could be a 3.5-day test match, maybe they go for the extra batting, maybe Weatherald at the top and Green at 6 and back their bowlers to get the job done. There has been some discussion, do you go ultra conservative and pick both Green and Webster and maybe to lengthen the batting and leave out one of the bowlers? I don't like that idea at all. I think it's a negative ploy and defensive. I think Australia needs to be aggressive, so I don't like it. But yeah, this has changed the complexion of this first test match immensely. Cummins was a big blow. Hazlewood is another huge, huge blow. And you look at what's happening over in Lilac Hill. England are having very poor preparation for this test match, very poor preparation. So I guess, can Australia catch England cold? That's still the thing. Can Australia catch England before they're acclimatized, before they've got used to the extra bounce? When we get to Melbourne and Sydney, it won't have the bounce that Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide have. And Adelaide's a day game, but so that might be a bit lower. So these first 2 pitches, Perth and Brisbane, are the bounciest pitches. Can Australia take advantage of England's lack of good preparation? And that's the question. Now, with Hazlewood, the way he was bowling, you would back them to do it. Now it's a different story. Now, Boland does not bowl the same trajectory as Hazlewood. He comes from a much lower release point. So does Brendan Doggett. Obviously, you've got Mitchell Starc, who is neither like Hazlewood or Cummins. We know he can spray it around a bit. He's an aggressive wicket taker. But this will give England an opportunity to go hard at Australia and try and rattle us and go one up in the series. And then anything's possible. If they can, we saw it last year with India. If you can take that first test match, then you can keep yourself in the series right the way through potentially. So, yeah, I was stunned when I saw this news about Hazlewood. And, I just sort of going back to, should they have played in this game? Should, Hazlewood have been put in cotton wool prior to this test match? And I just don't think you can do that. I think it's poor to do that. You need players being match hardened, and if we find out Hazlewood's not match hardened in the Shield match, it's better than finding it out in the test match. But yeah, very, 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 very stunning news. So I'm heading over to Perth on Wednesday. So I'll be there on Thursday for the captain's press conferences and then covering the whole test match from Perth. So really can't wait to do that. I'll be doing podcasts at the end of every day. Don't forget, you can buy your Ashes-themed T-shirts. They are flying off the shelves. The Bairstow Walk, the Unemployment Office, the Moral Victory, flying off the shelves. So the link is in the episode notes. And we've got a few special episodes this week heading into the first test. Obviously do one probably on the eve of the Ashes after the captain's press conferences. But be joined by Ashley Giles, former England test player, to get a bit of an England viewpoint ahead of the series. I'll be recording that Monday Australian time, Monday night. So expect that early Tuesday or Tuesday afternoon release. But yeah, I think this is this is a huge shock. They cleared Hazlewood. It seemed like Australia had dodged a bullet, and now Australia have 600 test wickets. This does put pressure on Starc and Lyon. Absolutely, it does. And Lyon, I guess that's the other thing. would they consider resting Lyon? We mentioned this in the last show, but now that Hazlewood's out, does it even make them consider that more if it is a raging green top? If it's like we've seen some pictures over there and they think Lyon might not bowl any overs. I mean, the first couple of test matches, apart from that first innings, last year Lyon hardly bowled. Now I just wonder if Australian selectors, if they're really ruthless, might think maybe we pick an extra quick here and give Lyon a spell. I wouldn't do that. I think you probably want the experience of Lyon now that you've lost 600 test wickets. You don't want to chuck out the GOAT. So I would be picking Lyon regardless of the conditions. But yeah, I mean, if you get out there and it's green and it's you think it could be a 3-day test match, then maybe you bring in a Nisa. I mean, Nisa's a experienced first-class cricketer, 2 test matches. Or do you play Webster instead of Lyon? You lengthen your batting. Webster could bowl spin and pace. But certainly Hazlewood being out has thrown the cat among the pigeons for this first test match. Can you imagine the high fives in the England dressing room today at Lilac Hill? So, yeah, that'll be great for them. All right, so look, that's it. Just wanted to jump on because, Australian cricket, the Australian cricket team is rocked now by injuries. 2 huge players out for Australia. And I can see England throwing a few punches in this first test match now. And it's a huge test of character for the Australians. I mean, this is what Australian cricket is built on. Backs against the wall stuff. Heroes coming from nowhere. I mean, this is Doggett's chance to be a star. This is Boland's chance. He's been that reserve that's come in. Well, now's your chance. First test of the series. Take 6 for 7 now, Scotty. That would rock the English. So heroes could be born this summer. It's an opportunity for new heroes. But, stunning that Hazlewood is out. Just if you want to watch something this weekend, Kevin Peterson has launched a new YouTube channel, The Switch, and he had Steve Smith on, and I watched 25 minutes of the 25-minute interview, and it was KP and Smith walking through Central Park. It was actually really interesting because Smith was more relaxed than you get him in most settings. He dropped his guard in Central Park, clearly sort of in holiday mode, and we got to see a bit of the character of Steve Smith. And I love Smith. He's just been a joy to cover. He's been the single greatest joy of this podcast, covering his career. And seeing him in that setting with KP, 2, great batters of the age, the modern age, talking about the craft and everything, really good. And you forget that their careers did cross over for quite a bit. So there was a bit of byplay about Smith getting Peterson out a few times. But yeah, if you want some content this weekend, go and watch Smith with KP. All right. Well, that's it for this emergency Ashes podcast. Hazlewood out. Doggett, you would imagine, will be getting his first test capped. And Brendan Doggett does have an Indigenous background. So when you look at how few Indigenous players have played for the men's Australian cricket team, this is a very important milestone. You've got Scott Boland and Jason Gillespie, the only 2 test players. You've got a few more in the one-day setup. But, this is and the female teams. But, this is quite significant. As I said, I had a good chat with Doggett out at Cricket Central, and he was hungry. You could tell he was hungry. And I was talking to him about load management and preparing for a summer, and he wouldn't have any of it. He just wanted to get out there and play for South Australia and bash the door down, and he's done that with 2 5-wicket hauls, and he'll be in that starting 11, touch wood, barring any more injuries on Friday. All right, everybody. Well, I hope the Hazlewood injury hasn't spoiled your weekend if you're Australian. I know the English, well, this will be brightening up their weekend, especially if you're back in the UK. Miserable weather, cold, rainy, in the tube, crowded in the tube. You'll be thinking, wow, well, no Cummins, no Hazlewood. I'm going to get up in the middle of the night when it's freezing and watch the Ashes. All right. Remember, Cricket Unfiltered will be here all summer. Get your Ashes T-shirts, please, and we'll be back soon.